Happy Monday, my fabulous vibers. Welcome back to my podcast, where I believe that every woman deserves to craft the life she wants and the guts to go after it. We will share stories, facts, and opinions on various aspects of life to give you that kick in the ass to light you up and spread killer vibes every day, 24/7. Today we have our favorite guest, my husband Rusk.
Oh boy.
Everyone loves him. I get so many DMs every time you come on my podcast, honey. Everybody loves it when you come and make a cameo.
No.
You know what? I think you have your own fan club.
Thank you. It'd be nice if I got paid.
Oh, you get paid. Don't you worry about that. Don't you worry. So today, hon, you know what we're going to talk about today?
I think I do.
So we're going to be talking about is marriage a business contract?
Oh boy.
I think two of your favorite things in the world, marriage and business.
Right.
Yeah.
Making money.
Oh, so you make money in both?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So, in history, we do know that marriage began as an economic arrangement between two families. Some cultures still include that. They do like an exchange of dowry as a way of reserving the right to marry a certain person. I was thinking just about this the other day because you and I love watching Indian matchmaking.
Right.
And it sort of
great show.
Takes you back to that idea of the arrangement of two families and this matchmaker who says in India we have two types of marriages. Mm-hmm. One is a marriage and one is a love marriage.
Yeah.
The marriage in itself for them is just considered arranged. Like, yes. You don't even have to say the word arranged anymore. It's considered an arranged marriage. And nowadays, modern day Indians or maybe Indians who live in America are looking for something more fulfilling, more romantic, not so business oriented. You do remember she gives everybody like little bio datas, right? Where you look at their education levels, where they come from, their family origins. Right. And they're picked on the sheet, so that everybody gets a sheet of paper and they see who they like, and it's all based on paper, basically. And we had one girl that we were just like, wow, this girl is just way too picky. I can't remember her name. Do you remember her name?
Yeah, I don't remember her name, but she was from Houston.
She was. Right. She was so picky.
Right.
And nothing could make her happy.
Nothing made her happy. There was no candidate out there that was sufficient for her. Yeah. And, I guess maybe you kind of, to be realistic, that's probably why she is where she is.
Yeah.
Because the matchmaker had said marriage and relationships are about compromise and flexibility.
Right.
You're obviously not going to find somebody that's the mirror image of you, and you wouldn't want that because that's boring.
Yeah.
You want somebody to bring in another angle to a relationship and another set of, not necessarily values, but another set of experiences.
Right. And nothing made her happy. I think you were in maybe 5 minutes when you watched it and you said, okay, this girl, she's on my last nerve already.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, I think it's sort of going back to where we talk a little bit about how marriage is a business contract and how they really consider that as a business contract. But I think it could be harmful if you're only looking at things on paper. I think if you and I were to go back to 1998 and we were presented biodatas, I don't think we would have been connected based on biodatas,
no,
right?
Absolutely not.
You and I were just so different and we came from such different backgrounds.
Right.
Also, we went to the same university and that's how we met. Mm-hmm. Your biodata
was different.
Was so different.
And even that matchmaker on the Indian show says the same thing. The biodata is just to start a conversation. Ultimately, you guys have to have chemistry that transcends any kind of analytics or algorithms that they can come up with. Yeah. That determines the two. There has to be this vibe in the air that kind of makes sense and to both partners. So the biodata is only a stepping stone. It's supposed to get you into the door, but doesn't mean that the door is going to open. So you have to kind of open the door on your own.
On your own, right. Yeah. You and I are just so different in terms of how we met and who we became later on as a marriage. Right. But you being of mixed race, your father's an Arab, your mother's from the Czech Republic. Right. You come from middle class family. You're the only child. with college-educated parents. Your parents are very highly educated. You have a degree in economics, philosophy. You are world travel as well. You know, even when we first met, you were in your 20s, you were already world traveled, and your family paid for your college education. I'm sure that was in your biodata, if I was to ever see your biodata.
Sure.
I, on the other hand, I'm the oldest of 4 kids from a Mexican immigrant family. I grew up in a really difficult neighborhood, attended college on grants and scholarships to become an educator. If you were to pair us on what's on paper, I don't think we would have been a good fit.
Yeah, unless the biodata delves more into the psychology and probably some values, which I haven't actually seen in that show.
Yeah.
But based on what you had mentioned, probably not. But I would assume that the biodata probably has something a little more detailed than that. But probably on the surface, on paper, I don't think we would have probably met.
Yeah, and so I think that's sort of where people think about business contracts and businesses or marriage as a business, because 2 people come in with such backgrounds, and you've been a partner in businesses yourself. You've had partners in the past, and you have partners now.
Right.
And I had a partner in business as well in another project that I had. I think if we would have seen things on paper, we would have probably not been partners if we would have really thought things through.
Right.
Yeah.
So even, going back to that show on Netflix with the Indian couples and the girl from Houston, I remember one of the prospects that the matchmaker had sent to that particular, I can't remember her name, but was a guy that seemed to be the complete opposite of her. He just started his career late in life. He was in his late 30s. He was, well-spoken, articulate kind of guy, but didn't seem like he knew what he wanted until it was too late. Too much lack of maturity came. But most very strong-willed women that are very determined and very ambitious typically don't want a very ambitious or strong-willed man. They typically want somebody that's subservient to them, not necessarily, in the subservient where as a slave or whatever, but subservient to the point where they don't want somebody stepping on their toes,
telling them what to do.
Telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And she's looking for a guy that wants her to tell him what to do, but I think ultimately she's fooling or kidding herself because she wants somebody that just kind of goes along with whatever she decides. And I think that guy was a perfect candidate for her. And I think that she needs to introspect and really delve back into who she is in order to, be successful in finding somebody.
So also, I think going back into how we were able to match with each other because we had common values. We probably didn't have the same upbringing, but our values were very much almost exactly the same.
Right.
We had the same idea about work ethic.
Right.
I think we both pretty much, and again, I talked to my producer Arlo about this, how Gen Xers are just so committed to working their ass off in something forever because there's a payback at the end.
Right.
And I think when I lived through that, the first 20 years of our marriage is where we lived to work.
Right.
And the younger generation, it's an episode we're going to be working on next time on talking about millennials and how they see a work-life balance different from what we would see it in terms of that. So for us, that's our connector. You knew that I wasn't lazy. I knew you weren't lazy. We had ambitions. We were super driven, even back then in our early life.
We had similar philosophies of practicality, of work ethic, right? We didn't like to waste our time with things that weren't going to work, or they're out of our reach or out of our scope. We concentrated on things that we were good at, and we also tried to evolve at the same time and better ourselves, and some things on the fringes, but we didn't jump around from one thing to another.
Yeah, we stuck with consistent.
We stuck with something, we committed to it, and then we did everything we could to achieve the goal at the end.
Yeah, right. And so I think that's part of where business comes in. There's a common goal, and the common goal for a business is to make money ultimately, right?
Yep. I mean, it's the sole motivation of a business is to be profitable.
Exactly. Right. So for us as our marriage, we were having that same goal, was to have money and to have the money because we had things that we wanted for ourselves.
Yep.
So you set up, let's say, a business plan, and in your business plan, you decide this is what we're going to be working on. This is going to be our mission. This is going to be what we invest our money on, and our returns. Every time we make money, where do we put the money back on?
Right.
And a marriage works very much the same way.
Yeah,
because as we go through life, we think about things in terms of, okay, we're going to have kids. What is that going to, what does that entail in terms of a business contract? The kids coming into the marriage.
Sure.
That changes the dynamic.
Yeah, it does.
Significantly.
It changes the equation.
It changes the equation.
Right.
Thank you. So I think that's something that we don't really talk about. It's not so romantic, and I think people who date nowadays want the romanticism, but honestly, I think a marriage is a lot like a business contract.
Yeah, for the most part it is. There's obviously emotional components that obviously can't be quantified as you can quantify in the business. Of course, there's going to be some math whiz that comes out and says you can put an algorithm to an emotional deal, but in reality, you can't really put a numerical value on the emotional aspect. There has to be a mental connection as well, not just a physical connection, and those things are hard to quantify. But for the most part, I think a successful marriage is communication, it's flexibility, it's like what you had mentioned. It's a contract. I mean, because just like in any business contract, if you have a partner, if you don't have a partner, but if you have a customer, you have to make it work because everybody's coming in from a different angle. Your wife's coming in from a different angle. Husband's coming in from a different angle, and I think in order for it to be successful, like in a business, you have to be able to give a little, take a little, to be flexible, take the middle of the ground approach.
Right. And I think as a business, you also have partners. You're always looking at what each partner is bringing to the table.
Yes.
How much money they invested.
Right.
How much energy they've invested into the business proposal.
Right.
If they're coming in, I know from knowing you for 20 years, every time you take on a business partner, you always look to see what else can they add value to this partnership that's not just money. I think for you, it's always about, can they do labor?
Right.
Can they make phone calls? Do they have a network of people that they can bring in?
But in terms of a marriage, in order, to apply what you had just said in terms of a marriage, the value is, for example, if one particular partner is good at one thing and then the other partner is good at something else, you kind of let that partner take the lead on that, and then let them do their thing. And I think that as long as there's an understanding that they're good at something, don't necessarily step on their toes. And I think if there's a lot of ego, a lot of pride in those kinds of things, and you're not doing the right thing, then I think it's always inefficient.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think that's something that you and I were really good at when we first met and we first got married, is that we knew what we brought to the table, and we knew what I could contribute in terms of our marriage and what you were able to contribute in terms of our marriage. Right. And it wasn't just I don't think we saw it as a contract back then. I think it doesn't even become a contract. I think you just kind of think of it in those terms later on.
Well, if a contract is defined by putting a signature to a piece of paper. But a marriage,
you do sign something, don't you?
A
marriage license.
All right, so you do. I mean, a marriage is a legal entity, right? Because in the eyes of, for example, the IRS,
or the IRS,
it's all very legalized. They can care less about the emotional side of it. So in a sense, marriage is a business contract, whether you like it or not, but it's obviously more complex and more of a gray area than just simply black and white.
Yeah.
But you don't actually sign, maybe there might be some folks out there, obviously prenups and postnups are very defined.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about a prenup. Let's talk a little bit, because that also comes in where we talk a little bit about what is a prenuptial agreement. And that's a private agreement between a couple. They sign this before they get married, and it sets forth the division of their assets.
Right.
What assets they come in, to the marriage with, and then how many of those grow in the marriage, and then what they get at the end if there's a divorce. The post-nuptials are contracts that are better known as after your marriage. You can determine the division of a couple's money, property, and that usually happens before a divorce or if there's a death of the spouse.
The post-nup usually happens if there's a gain of asset value that wasn't there before the marriage. So if you, for example, came across, let's say you became a famous rock star or something like that, and you weren't that before the marriage, and then you have your doubts about your other significant other taking some of those assets, and those are usually all very psychological. Those things that determine the prenup and the postnup. Mostly the postnup is that you're not feeling that there's a lot of honesty, or I'm not a family therapist. I'm not trained in that. I'm just going based on
your experience
and maybe some common sense, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you have a family therapist, if you have a postnup, it's mostly that you came across something, but you don't necessarily trust a significant other to do the right thing after you ascertain this greater wealth and assets.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess it's not as romantic if you see it that way. I don't know. Do kids nowadays? I want my producer to jump in real quick.
Right.
Are you guys seeing marriage as a contract, or are y'all seeing it more as of a romantic? I want to be married, happy, happy, happy.
Actually, I think most of us are looking at it in a very balanced way. I would say that a lot of people talk about it in the romantic way, and they also put in the aspect of your own identity, like what you bring in the marriage before. And it could be ranging from your professional life, your financial situation, to your emotional past,
right?
Everything,
yeah. Do you think that's why a lot of young people are not getting married and they're just living with with another person? Because that happens a lot, and they're not having big weddings anymore. They're thinking smaller, more practical.
Yes. Right now, the hookup culture is something that has been very criticized over the past years, but it's precisely because of the same thing. Very Sex and the City like, where like the girls ask themselves, like, why can't we find a single man that's worth it? Because no person that has like all of these different achievements in their list, including the girls, nobody wants to settle down just like that, not with somebody who's not worth it.
Yeah.
And nowadays, since we see it in a more balanced way, and a more like all of these different aspects are more openly discussed, it's more like we don't want to take on a responsibility that we know we're not going to be able to meet.
Exactly.
But would you say, Arlette, that the social media, the availability of the platforms has created a market that makes it easier for people that want to date or find someone? It's obviously easier, right? Because, for example, when Alicia and I grew up and as a Gen Xers, we didn't have any of that available to us. So to find somebody was more effort. You had to go. You had to get a hookup recommendation from a friend. They put you together, right?
Yeah.
I know that may sound ancient to you, but you get friends that put each other. You had to work for it. You had to come across somebody physically and meet them and talk to them.
Find a way to just
you can now swipe right or swipe left or whatever it's called on the computer, and you get to salute. So you now have this greater availability. So the effort to find somebody is easier, but at the same time, it's also easier to dismiss somebody because it's easier to find somebody again. Because if I had to start all over with a relationship, that means I'd have to go out there and meet somebody, and that takes time and effort.
Yes. So we all know about Tinder. Tinder is the go-to app when you want to find a hookup. Like, there's nothing else to find on Tinder. There's also Bumble, there's Hinge.
But do the people that sign up for those know that that's what they're for?
For Tinder, yes.
Yeah.
If you sign up for Tinder, you know that you're only getting...
On Bumble, do the girls really think they're getting a relationship out of that?
Maybe, because Bumble is more designed on what the girl wants to do. Like,
she's the one that sets the...
She's the one who swipes right on the guy, and until she starts a conversation, you can both start speaking.
Got it. Okay.
And on Hinge, they only give you like 3 different questions that you need to answer, and from that, you establish desirability for that person.
Got it. Okay.
But yes, it's both functional. However, it is functional, and it's way more efficient than the way it used to be. But it's
the downside.
The downside is that it makes things so unromantic.
Right.
It makes things
very platonic on the surface.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, superficial.
It makes it hard to find
Right.
the person you want, because you will dismiss them by what you're seeing.
Yes.
And not only that,
because you can just always go back home and then get back on the app and then try it again, right?
Exactly. And it also makes it superficial. I've heard a lot of criticisms about people criticizing the profile pictures people put in those apps.
Oh, they do that?
Yeah, because you put a whole collection of pictures and you expect to see the best of the person.
There's reviews on these apps?
Yeah.
Oh my God, really?
And there are, by people of my age, we love them. That's
oh my goodness.
Really? There's so
Imagine
you get to I've never looked at a dating app. So you're telling me that there are reviews on dating apps of the people, like this guy was a schmuck or he stood me up or something to that effect?
And I have heard of those, yes.
Oh my God. Wow.
If you ever find this user, don't follow him.
See, that's part of the problem.
Or can I just tell you?
Right.
My friend posted some pictures of married guys that were on these apps.
Oh!
So that's a whole other ballgame. These guys that are married and are posting their photos on these apps, and these girls are like, "Hey, I know this guy. That guy is married to my friend."
Yes.
Okay.
You know,
there's a good side to that.
Of course, there's like everything to it, but I am wondering if younger people are seeing marriage as a business contract or a business decision in terms of, because let's be honest, women at a certain age, let's say she gets to the 30s, she says, I want to have kids, I'm going to find me a guy who can give me kids and give me a good life. They don't give a shit sometimes if they even like the guy. They don't care if they're even sexually attracted to him.
Well, from what I just...
If he has a good job, if he can give them the kids and give them the life, they're probably going to marry him because it's a contract for them.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily feel an attraction.
It seems to start off as a contract from what Arlo had just said. I mean, if you get all this information on people and then you can customize who you are, and then you can listen at their customization or their itemize of who they are, and then it's already on paper. It's a matter of purely just executing the contract by meeting them instead of actually signing on it.
And yet, I would still say that the dating process is just as complicated. Because when I did go on dates with guys that I met on these apps, it was still just as awkward. The only bad thing about it, though, is that even though these people, like you said, they customize their profile, they tell you what they're supposed to like, and then you meet them and they're not that bad at all.
So that's the problem, is that you're now expecting them instead of getting to know them. And it's just that getting to know people without information creates a sense of lower expectations, right? And then you have it on paper, and then you have these higher expectations, and they don't meet those expectations. You're already disappointed.
And and then you find out that you're probably smarter than them, or that they have more interest in Star Trek than Star Wars, etc., etc.
Those guys do Star Trek and Star Wars.
Don't get started, honey. That's a whole other tangent.
If you're in your 30s and you're still into Star Trek and Star Wars, that's a movie you send your kids. You take your kids to at the movie theater. You have grown out of that.
Okay, so let's go back and regroup.
You need to grow out of Star Trek.
We are in our 40s, but we really are like in our 50s.
But even, I mean, it's just like, your kids ask you, hey, what's Star Trek? I say, well, you know what? It's a movie I watched. It was a series that I watched when I was a kid.
Honey, but they're obsessed with it.
The kids are obsessed.
The kids. Young people.
Right, but there's this whole clique, this whole what's it called? Fan club of Star Trek.
Yes. They do Comic-Con. They do all of it.
Give me a
so judged in this conversation.
Give me a break.
That's where our age is showing, Arlette. We're much older than you, and that's where we come from. Let's just be honest.
In your 20s, I can still kind of get that, but once you hit 25...
No, not when you hit 25,
you finish college, you need to give up Star Trek and Star Wars. And all the other Comic-Con bullshit that's out there. Is that bleep? Can you bleep?
No. We're not bleeping you at all. We're keeping you in. And all the craziness you talk about. I don't know. I think it's really, really cool to kind of think of how marriages can be, I guess, constructed to be like a business contract. Because I think we know couples we're not going to talk about it. We know couples that feel like they are business contracts, that there's really no romanticism in the couple. There's really no true like attraction. Like you go home and you're like, okay, they're not screwing. They're definitely not,
There's no sexual relations.
There's no sexual tension. You could just tell they're in it for, she gets the fantastic house and the kids and he gets the wife at home. But there's no like serious attraction.
Well, I think it's probably died down because I think the key component is flexibility, and in flexibility, I think is to expand on that doesn't mean that you have to just kind of give or take, but you have to constantly be changing and evolving in your relationship as you get older. Your interests change, and then you have to do things different to keep a marriage, not on the edge, but on interesting. And I think a lot of marriages that we know are simply there just for their kids. And they're waiting for their kids to grow up. They're waiting for the kids to get through college where they can kind of stand on their own 2 feet. And I think after that, I think the dominoes will fall.
Yeah. So how do you measure the failure of a marriage in comparison to the failure of a business?
Well, they're both equally the same. They're both failures, right? Because, a lot of people think failure of the business is, you can kind of move on, but the failure...
There's loss of money,
loss of money, but also a divorce is a failure of the same kind of commitment. You commit to a business relationship, you commit to a relationship with someone else, whether it has some business components or ROI incorporated in it, but either way, it's a failure. And I think they're equally the same. I don't think there's much difference between the failure of a marriage or a business, but it's a loaded question because it's not a black and white answer. It's a very gray question. Some people say, I'm so happy I got out of that relationship. I'm free now. I'm excited to be moving on. And there's contentment for it overshadows the failure, even though they may not necessarily admit to it. But I think the ability to be out of something and free is defined as success for them.
But let me bring in the emotional component, because in a business, when the business fails, there's emotion, but when a marriage fails, I think there's a heaviness in the emotion. Not only that, but the family emotions. You carry on the kids. I think in business, you kind of tend to think of it in more of like a black and white situation. I know there's grays, but you think of it, okay, so we failed in that. Okay, well, we'll pick up and we'll move on. In a marriage, I think a lot of times for the women, they see themselves as like, okay, who's going to want me now that I've become a divorcee, now that I'm not, that... Well,
it's a divorcee can just simply find another divorcee and they can relate.
I know, but for them in their mind, I don't think they're thinking of it that way. I don't think they're thinking it in such practical ways. I think they're thinking it in more emotional ways. In business, we tend to take the emotion out of business because you do say you don't mix business with pleasure. You don't mix emotions with business. No, in a marriage, emotions are always a part of it.
Because business, to be successful in the business, you have to be married to the business. And in order for it to work, I've been through it for 20 years in the auto repair business. It's honestly another wife. It's another child for me. It demanded 90% of my time, of 70 hours out of the week. And even when I wasn't there, I was still thinking.
So let me ask you.
So that leads to, it's a case by case situation for each couple. For each, some women will say, I'm emotionally distraught. Some women will say, I'll never find somebody again. The same thing for a guy. Each case, the guy looks at himself physically, and he says, I'm out of shape. I'm bald. I'm gray hair.
Yeah.
And so it's not simply just saying that some people will be happy to be out of a marriage. Some people won't be happy to be in a marriage. Some people will look at it as something I can get through. Some people will take a year or two before they can move on.
But let's just put it this way. If you had failed at your business, let me just finish the question. Yeah. If you have failed at your business, would you have been as devastated about failing at your business as if you and I had failed in our marriage?
Well, it's knowing, me. I'm not going to answer the question and say yes or no. It's just not. If I had 9 businesses I was successful at, I failed at one, I'll say whatever. I failed at one. I have a great track record.
So the business doesn't really hold that much weight in terms of your marriage. So you really aren't married to the business.
Well, it's it depends if you were successful in the other marriages. In my case, if I took a stab at one business and I failed at it, and I put everything I had into the business, every single penny, I worked 120 hours a week, I did everything I possibly that I was capable, and I failed at, I think I'd be miserable. Because if I convinced myself that I could succeed at this, it just didn't work out, I would probably be upset about it. But if you're successful at 7 or 8 different investments or whatever, and one doesn't necessarily go right, you kind of chalk it up as,
But what if that's the only business you have?
That's what I just said. If it was only business that you had, then it would probably be devastating. But some people will tell you, I tried my hand at a business, it didn't work out, I'm just going to go back in the corporate world. And they'll just shrug it off. It's a case-by-case, individual-by-individual situation. People handle things differently. Some people can just shrug something off real easily, and some people, dwell on it for a long time. Everybody's hardwired.
Yeah. And I think
uniquely.
Going back to the premise, it's, sometimes we have to really think about marriage as an arrangement. Marriage is a negotiation of two parties coming together, and then determining what's going to be the ROI. What is that return on your investment? Is it going to be successful kids? Is it going to be a long-term marriage? Is it going to be, what is it? Every couple, I think, has a different return on their investment. I don't think every couple has the same thing in their mind.
No, and some people,
as they marry.
Some families, some marriages want 5 or 6 kids. We decided for 2 kids, and we spaced them out because we're very practical people. We didn't want 2 kids in college at the same time. We didn't want 2 teenagers at the same time. We didn't want them, learning how to drive at the same time. We spaced it out intentionally. But some folks are kind of more, I would say, center right or right brain leaning, and they can handle 5 or 6 kids. That's not who we are. And marriage to them is about the size of the family, and a lot of family nights, and a lot of board games and stuff like that, and that works for them.
I think one thing we really haven't discussed it, and I think it's very important, and it comes back to business arrangements, and it comes to marriage contracts, and in contracts in every way, is if it's an equal partnership between the two parties.
Right. Well, I think a successful marriage should be an equal partnership, not equal necessarily at all times, though. I think over the long term, a marriage needs to come back always to the center, but not all the time is it equal. And I think what we hear from a lot of our friends is that there's a lack of equality, a lack of effort in the marriage, that one particular spouse is doing this, and this, and the other spouse doesn't do absolutely anything, doesn't contribute to their relationship. No one forces you to get married in this country. That's the one thing about the United States, is that there are no social stigmas if you're not married. If you're a bachelor, if you're a bachelorette and you want to stay that way for the rest of your life, no one's holding a gun to your head and says you have to do it. That's not necessarily the case in a lot of parts of the world. Like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, you go to the Far East, you go to Africa, you go to the Middle East, those things are they're required, they're a requisite in life. You must find somebody. And that's the thing about here, is that you don't have to find somebody. So if you're going to find somebody, if you want to have an equal partner, I think like anything else, you need to be good at it. And the success to being good at it is to compromise and to be flexible.
Absolutely.
I practiced that philosophy in business. I didn't treat every customer the same way. I adjusted and custom tailored my approach to the needs of my clientele. And I think that's how you should apply yourself in all situations in life, because not all situations are equal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in every situation, there is a different couple in every situation. Some couples find that one way works for them. Other couples find that another way works for them. And I think it's really important that we maintain a sense of, we don't make blanket statements about marriages and blanket statements about business associations.
Right.
I think blanket statements or generalizations are very useless.
They're useless
in this time and age. I think everybody comes into things in a different way and they negotiate the terms of their relationship. every time you're going out or doing things, you're negotiating with that partner.
Right.
Hey, what restaurant are we going to? Well, I want to do Chinese. No, I want to do Mexican. You're negotiating at that point.
Yeah, right.
You have kids. How are we going to raise our kids? Well, I think we should raise our kids this way. No, I think we should negotiate. We should, raise our kids that way. You're negotiating all the time. It's a matter of negotiation and thinking of things in that sense.
Right.
However, you and I are super practical people, so we see things in very practical ways. And I think one thing we did from the beginning is we really discussed our terms and what we were willing to put into the relationship and we were willing to get out of the relationship.
For example, you were raised Catholic, not necessarily practicing Catholic, as some people just devise cafeteria Catholic. I grew up with atheist parents, even though I was baptized when I was a kid.
Right.
Their views on religion had changed as my parents' relationship evolved. And I compromised. I went to a Catholic church.
You got married with me in a Catholic church.
My father had compromised with you as stubborn and hard-headed as he could be, because he saw the value as a practical person, as who you were as a person, right? He says, this is a good partner for my son, and I'm not going to get too bent over the religious component of it, because it's purely the way he viewed it and the way I viewed it. It was just part of the marriage that day.
Yes.
It was just part of the process, the part of the procession, right? I almost would have felt that if I had a judge there doing it, it would have not felt right. As practical and as grainy,
as down to earth you are. You're extremely down to earth.
I just wouldn't want a judge there who I didn't know personally, giving me the rights of something. I think it was more romantic was the Catholic component of the church and all that, even though I didn't believe in any of that stuff. Right?
I know, and I think for you, and not only your dad, honey, it was part of your mom, because your mom was someone that really wanted to see you get married in the church.
Right.
Your aunt, your family really wanted to see that part of you, and I think that goes back to negotiations again, and flexibility. Is you said, hey, it's something I'm not going to fight. It's something I'm going to go with.
I just think that if you constantly try to find a person identical to yourself,
that's not
you're never going to find that. It's difficult. It's a small niche of people out there.
Wow, what a good conversation. I think we could go on for how long has this already been? Already an hour, maybe? We're going on forever. We could talk forever on this subject. Rusk and I talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
When this came up, I thought, oh my God, this guy could totally bring in a beautiful perspective, because I don't know, man. We always just see eye to eye on everything.
Yeah, we do. I mean, that's why we click, is that you got to see eye to eye on stuff.
Yeah.
And, you have to compromise.
And guess what? Even though we have negotiations, there's still a lot of love.
Yeah, there's a lot of love.
A lot of kissing, a lot of hugging.
I get this. The other day I was I'm taking.
He hates that part.
But whatever, I compromise, right?
You do.
I was doing these wine classes, these are different levels of wine, and put some certification behind the bragging. And so I had some friends that came up to me, why are you doing this wine class? And he's like, well, what are you going to do for it? And I said, well, maybe I'll own a winery. Maybe it's a crapshoot out there that I may not get to something like that.
It's been a pipe dream of ours for years.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And it may not happen, but it's just the fact that you want to constantly better yourself. You want to evolve as a person. You want to learn something new. And that's the thing, is you want to learn, and having the mentality of constantly wanting to learn something new, I think is a fundamental foundation for a relationship.
Oh my gosh.
Because you can constantly wanting to know the person you're with all the time from at the beginning.
Oh my God, honey, that's like a beautiful nugget.
Because if you are thinking that your ways are the only ways, or your culture is the only way, there's so much value out there from other people that can bring an experience into your life. Because I'm less of a heartfelt kind of guy. You're more of a heartfelt kind of girl, right? And you bring that kind of heart to my relationship. You make me more sensitive, more sympathetic, more emotional from sometimes.
Yeah.
And I kind of brought the more of the cognitive practicality to your component, and you accepted that, and I accepted, what you brought in.
It was a give and take.
It was give and take.
It was a give and take, and I think that's a really beautiful nugget that we can end on, because I think it's so important that you said that correctly, and you ended this segment the most beautiful way. It is about that give and take.
Right.
And it really is a negotiation between two people. It's like a business, maybe. I don't know. Some people will think that's crazy. For us, it's practical and it makes sense.
Right.
But it really is, growing together and finding things about that other person, or learning things about that other person, and maybe teaching them something new and unique and different and special.
You have to constantly evolve. You got to better yourself as a person.
Always.
Right.
And a marriage evolves. And a lot of people grow out of a marriage because they evolved in different aspects, in different ways. And maybe one went one way, the other went the other way. When it's together, I think it's really beautiful and very heartfelt, and people can see that, because they say, oh wow, you guys have like grown together. Like, you guys met when you were 21, 23. Yeah, we could have been the type of people that I went one way, you went another, but we grew up together. We decided we were going to just find interests that we were both going to enjoy, and we grew in terms of that.
And the other thing is that you have to have a thick skin in this world. Not everything that you do is you're always going to be successful at. I tried, getting a pilot's license, and I got 20 out of 30 hours out of it, but I didn't necessarily finish it. It didn't work out for me. I had, but don't let that bother you.
So does a thick skin apply in a marriage and a business?
Yes,
in both.
You have to have a thick skin. I mean, that's you can't let things bother you. You have to shake things off, wake up the next day, and move on.
And get going.
Right? Because you're dealing with another human being. Whether it's in business, whether it's in a marriage, you can't let the little stuff always bother you, as long as there's the big pictures involved, where you realize, well, she said this or he said this, but then he did 80% of the other things that I had asked him to do. I mean, as long as there's more positive than negative, don't
dwell on the little bullshit.
Right.
Russ comes always does these nuggets, and I love it, and that's why he has all of these fan clubs and like groupies following him, because they are like, I want to know what Russ thinks about this. Can you ask him what he thinks of? Oh, by the way, let me just tell you, my parents don't ask me for my advice; they ask for his advice. So let's just go that route.
What does Russ think?
Anyhow, what does he think? I'm like, what? You didn't ask me what I think. Anyhow, thank you so much for following along today and being here. Thank you, honey, for being such a beautiful component to our podcast. You always bring it, and I'm so grateful that you bring all of yourself to the conversation. Again, are we thinking in terms of marriage? Are we thinking in terms of business contract? That is up to you. You make that decision for yourself. You're out dating. All we're doing is giving you guys a little bit of information, a little bit of our perspective. We're turning 20 years married this November, and I think we can give you guys a little perspective on what it takes to be married for such a long time, and be married and being happy. Not only married, but happy as well. So it's a business contract, it's a marriage, it's an arrangement of sorts, but it's, interestingly enough, is it an arranged marriage or is it a business contract? What do you think? Let us know. Give us your feedback. I want to hear from you. Tell us what you think, and also share us with your friends. Let us know what's up. And if you want to hear anything from us, send us a DM, send us some conversation. We want to know from you. See you guys soon.